Hey everyone, it's Carter. Welcome to this episode of Making It Up, my in conversation show where I talk to other writers. And we have a great time just kind of chatting it up about the industry, about the process of writing, highlights, failures, all that kind of stuff. Today on the show is DP Lyle, Doug Lyle. So I know Doug a little bit. He's a thriller writer. He writes a lot of medical thrillers and as well as other thrillers, and he's got about 24 books to his name. Went to he's a cardiologist by training, so he's steeped in science and medicine. So a lot of his books are also steeped in science and medicine. But he started writing thrillers because, as he put it, he grew up in Alabama, where in the South you had to know how to tell a story or you wouldn't get fed. So he and his family were storytellers by heart, and he started to learn how to become a storyteller by trade. And he has several different groups of series of books out. His most recent release is Double Blind, a Samantha Cody mystery. And he's got several more in the works, but it was great talking to him because I've known him through ITW, International Thriller Writers. We used to share the same publisher in Ocean View, so I knew him a little bit through that. And he was fantastic to talk to because, now that he actually teaches writing as well, he's just got so much good advice. So our conversation, throughout our conversation, he had a lot of good advice for newer writers or writers still, seeking publication. And a lot of it just has to do with, get out of your own way. Don't overcomplicate things. And we spent a little bit of time talking just about the idea of confidence and how, it takes a while because there's so much rejection in writing and trying to get published. And there's so much self-doubt, borderline self-hatred that comes, from book 1 to book 24. It doesn't matter. That always exists. But then developing that confidence to know, hey, I got this. I don't quite know how I'm going to finish this book or how it's going to resolve, but I have the confidence to know that I can figure it out. And that's such a huge thing. And I truly believe the more confident writers are the ones who are perhaps more successful or at least having more fun in it, because it's, like I said, it's a brutal industry. And once you develop that confidence, it really helps. And it also helps with other facets of your life. So I think just kind of being confident and curious in general are two things that really help writers. And Doug certainly spoke to that as well. So he was fantastic to talk to. And then at the end, we made up a little quirky mystery based on a sentence from William Lashner's Hostile Witness. Hope you enjoyed. This is my conversation with DP Lyle.
Brother-in-law live in Oklahoma City, so we're gonna be there for a little while and a couple of days. Then we're going to like South Carolina. We're going to Charleston, going to Hilton Head. We're going back to Fairhope, Alabama, which is where a lot of my books are set, and it's fantastic. San Antonio, Tucson, and back. Just zip across and zip back. Spend some time in Nashville, one of our favorite cities. So.
Oh yeah, I'm quite familiar with Nashville. It's a lot of fun. It's loud.
And down to Franklin. All those places. I just love that. I love that area.
So where
I grew up in North Alabama, so
that's what I was going to ask. Okay, and where are you now?
Orange County, California.
Oh, okay. So quite literally on the other side. Okay.
Exactly.
Got it. Yeah, I grew up in the Westlake Village, Thousand Oaks, Ventura County. Area, but don't go back there very often, but lovely area for sure. So
getting crazy though.
What is it like when you go back to, the town where you set a lot of your books in? Is that something you do often? Is that important to you? Do you learn something new every time?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And I do, I go to places and like Fairhope and all that. I have my Jake Longley series is set in Gulf Shores and environs, but they move around. Actually, they came out here for one of the books, the OC, because Nicole had a place in Newport. So anyway, they came out here and got involved in a celebrity stalking case. But this one's set in and around Fairhope, and the one I'm working on now, right now, I was writing this morning in Magnolia Springs, which is a great little farming community down there by Mobile Bay. But yeah, I go back and do that, and then my Kane Harper series is set out of Nashville. They kind of live there and go out from there. So yeah, and some of this will be to do further research for books, but some of it's just for fun and get back to my roots.
Do you, like using Fairhope as an example, do you identify, do you go, because I've done this before, but very rarely, because I don't do a lot of research for my books, but do you go and you identify like, this is the house where this person lives? I just decided it's going to be this place.
Yes and no. I mean, I will go look at some neighborhoods while I'm there and all businesses and the district where all the businesses are and all that stuff. And I'll look at all that and I'll stick true to some of the streets, but then I make up stuff.
Sure.
It's enough for people who live there to say, okay, identify that. I know where that is. I know that, even though they know that this, and this doesn't exist.
Right.
But at least it has the feeling that it could exist.
Right. And that's, overall, that's still a fairly
That's
small
the key.
population of your readership is going to be, the
Exactly.
people from Fairhope. So nobody else is, you don't ever have to go there. Nobody else is going to know the difference, but it's probably important to you to have kind of that sense of
Sure.
visual elements in your own mind.
Yeah. And when I wrote the Royal Pains books, I researched the Hamptons online, with Google Maps, with
Right.
looking at businesses, with looking at homes for sale, that kind of stuff. You go to the real estate section, the business section, you find all this stuff. And so I wrote those 2 books, and I've had several people come up to me and said, wow, you nailed the Hamptons. You must spend a lot of time there. So I've never been there in my life.
Right. And that I always talk about this with other authors, like the extent of research, because I'm convinced personally that like a lot of the authors who do a lot of research, I mean, it depends on what you're writing.
Right.
But if you're talking about location stuff, it's because they like to do that. It makes it's part
Sure.
of their, soul. But you're totally right, because I've done the same thing. You can literally virtually walk down the streets anywhere you want.
Yes.
And say, okay, I totally get it. But there is something different when you go there, but in terms of making it believable, it's not too difficult to do without ever having visited a place.
I agree.
I'm much different than 20 years ago, obviously. But so growing up in Alabama, what were your parents doing? Where were you into books as a kid?
That's interesting. Not really, because I was mainly into school and sports. I knew
Yeah.
what my job was as a kid, so to speak. I knew it was to go to school, play sports, and not get in too much trouble, not
Right.
drive my parents crazy. My dad worked at the post office and then had an accounting business. My mom was a bookkeeper for a dairy and then a bowling teacher. She was a professional bowler. And so both my parents had 2 jobs growing up. They always did. That's just the way it was. And I had 2 sisters. We grew up and had a pretty normal life, great family, great parents, ate dinner together every night, all that stuff.
Oh, wow.
But all of them could tell a story.
Hmm.
We always said my mom never let truth get in the way of a good story. She could just go on the fly and take off.
Yeah.
And then Dad had a very, very dry sense of humor, so he could tell funny stuff that you had to pay attention to. But anyway, so I grew up with storytelling.
Do you think, like with your mom, it was like she just liked to hold court? It was important to her to have the attention on her?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, my mom really doted on other people, but we always joked that if we walked into a room of 100 people, my dad and I, in an hour, would probably meet 3 of them. Okay.
Right.
Mother would meet every one of them, and she wouldn't approach any of them. They would always come to her. It was a joke.
Okay.
It was
Charismatic, huh?
Yeah. We were in Italy once and we'd stopped in Rome and we stopped in this little store. Dad needed to buy some socks. We're in there. And he said, "Where's your mother?" I said, "Oh, she's probably outside talking to somebody." And we looked outside through the window and there she was talking to this Italian woman. Now the woman didn't speak English, mother didn't speak Italian, and they were both talking at the same time. And that's the perfect example.
Oh, well,
I always said she was like a 3-wood in a tiled shower.
Wow. And that's the other part of growing up in the South. You get all these great expressions.
Yeah. But every day was a party for her. Every day was fun.
So in high school, did you have like, were you thinking about college? Were you thinking about what you wanted to study? What was kind of, I mean, I know what you eventually went on to study, but where were your interests during that time?
Well, I knew exactly where I was going. When I was 10 years old, my dad and I watched a documentary on the first blue baby surgery. There's a
Hmm.
long story there that I won't bore you with. But anyway, we were watching this thing and when it was over with, I said, that's what I want to do. And Dad said, well, that'd be a good thing to do if you want to do that. And they never pushed us in any direction. I knew from that moment that I was not only going to go into medicine, I was going to go into hearts. I knew
Hmm.
it. And I never wavered after that.
Why do you think that is? Like, it's stunning to me to have such a specific realization at such a young age and to stick with it.
It just felt right. Now,
Huh.
there was a brief time in high school where I wore braces. So orthodontics, I thought, boy, this is cool.
Yeah.
But, that was a passing little fleeting little thing. I always knew where I was going. I just always knew.
So you're interested in the human body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And especially the heart.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
just, it fascinated me and still
So
does.
so take me through your schooling progression. So then you went undergraduate on a pre-med
Yeah,
path.
at Alabama and
Okay.
went there on a pre-med, roll tide. And, and then I went to medical school in Birmingham and did an internship there. And then I moved off to Houston and I did my residency and my cardiology fellowship at Texas Heart Institute in Houston there. And then moved out to California and, I've practiced out here since then pretty much.
What was the reason to move out to California at that point?
I visited when I was in my second year of fellowship, finishing my last year of fellowship. I came out and visited a friend of mine that I'd known since childhood, and he and his wife and stayed in Newport Beach where they lived. And I said, "This is where I want to live."
So you became a cardiologist.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, got it.
exactly.
And so you're practicing, and that's got to be a pretty good living, I would think. Probably paying off some decent student loans along the way. Um,
I never had any student loans. Everything was so cheap.
oh,
I mean,
that's great.
my medical school was like $280 a semester because it was in state.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, college
Wow.
was like $180 a semester. Yeah.
That's a pretty good payoff then to become a cardiologist at the end of it.
Well, I mean, George Wallace, way back in the day, said you can sell alcohol in this state, but every nickel of it that you buy alcohol goes to education.
Mhm.
So the state schools were very well supported, and the
Um,
trade schools he built were very well supported.
so, during all this time and knowing all the degree of work that's involved with medical school and everything that follows and going into practice, were you were you storytelling at this time, either verbally or, I'm curious about the genesis of the actual storytelling in your life.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I didn't do a lot of study a lot of literature in college and high school and college and all that.
Me neither.
I didn't do well in it. I did well in the sciences, but I didn't do well in that. I couldn't write a letter to save my life. Hello,
Hmm.
how are you? I'm fine, and that's it. That's all I can get out. So I never was very good at that. I just wasn't. But I could tell a story. I mean, if you grew up in the South, you have to tell a story. They won't feed you. They'll put you behind a bar and let you die. And that's just part of the culture. You sit
Mhm.
around, you tell stories. And I could always do that. I could spin a yarn. And I read a lot. I always read a lot. And from about the time I was 14 years old, when I read my first novel, The Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, I said,
Hmm.
wow, this is phenomenal. And then I started reading all the way through medical training. After the first 2 years of medical school, because you didn't have time to, even breathe then. I always took the month of August off where I would not read journals,
Hmm.
nothing medical. And I would take the 5 or 6 novels that were bestsellers that year that interested me, and I would read them. So every
So not
August was my
necessarily
reading month.
science fiction like
No,
Burn,
no, no, all kinds of stuff.
whatever, but all fiction, all
All
novels.
yeah, yeah, fiction, all kinds of stuff. And then I always said, okay, I'd like to write some stories. I have some stories in my head. I'd like to write them. I didn't know if I could, but I thought, why not? And I said, well, when I retire, I got these stories all right. And then about 25 years ago, I thought, well, I'm probably not ever going to retire. I mean, I'm still working now. I'm not ever going to retire. I
Right.
said, so if not now, when? So I took some night classes at University of California, Irvine. They had a great writing program there. Great people came from there. T. Jefferson Parker, he was one of their
Mhm.
their students, and Jeff's a great guy. But anyway, so I took a couple of night classes and I started writing. I joined a couple of writing groups, and things took off from there.
So what's interesting to me, we have not a parallel background, but certainly a commonality in the sense that we didn't start writing until well after college, and
Right.
with no formal education in doing so. I didn't even take night classes. I just, all right, how do I do this? How does
Yep.
writing
Yep.
work?
Yep.
And I'm like you, in college, like I just had an undergraduate degree, but I didn't have to take any English classes unless I wanted to. I had basically a business degree, so I didn't read, until my 20s probably. So, you're saying that you couldn't write a letter to save your life, and now you're taking classes. Did you find that learning to write maybe wasn't as hard as you thought? Maybe you had a knack for it, or wasn't so hard, you just had to do it, as opposed to like, some people just really struggle with the process of writing. Take classes, doesn't matter. What, how hard was it for you to kind of start to learn really to put thoughts together into a story?
Well, I think I made it harder than it needed to be, but and I always tell students this when I teach writing, and I think it's a very, very, very important lesson that I wish I had learned 10 years before I did, because I read every book on writing known to man, probably
Right.
100 of them, and you know which ones they are. You read them too, and a
Yeah,
lot of
Stephen
others.
King's on writing is still
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah,
pinnacle
yeah,
for
yeah.
me.
Saul Stein, all this stuff. You read all these things, but you read all these books on writing. Um, and you realize there's a bunch of rules. And now you're terrified to step outside of those rules because, well, especially being a scientist,
Right.
you follow the rules. Medicine's very logical. Writing is not logical, it's messy. And so you're trying to force everything to stay inside the, paint inside the lines. You're always trying to keep things organized and keep things correct according to Hoyle. Okay. But there comes a point after about a decade of hammering against the wall, and I got some stuff published and all of that, that you realize, wait a minute, this doesn't mean crap. What you got to do is tell the damn story.
Right.
Just tell
Right.
the damn story. Shut up and tell the story. There's
Right.
only two stories. Somebody comes, somebody goes. It just hadn't been told by you. Every
Right.
story's been told, hadn't been told by you. And if I could tell writers, especially novice writers, one other thing, get out of your own way. Don't worry about the final product. Just tell scene by scene by scene, as if you're sitting in a bar telling a story to a friend. You
Right.
can go back and fix it.
Right.
Just tell the story.
But get it
once
down.
Once I learned that, I did two things. I started becoming much more prolific as far as being able to write. I wasn't as hand-tied. And number two, I quit outlining. I just start with a scene and start writing.
That's me. Yeah, I never outline.
I figure it out as I go.
But I think everyone's got their own style,
Yes.
whether you've done a lot of writing or not. I think inherently you kind of have a tendency to do something. I find that, I read several books on writing, but you can find totally contradictory information in those books. It's like, well, what do I follow? And secondly, it depending on the nature of who you are as a writer, it can suck all the joy out of writing.
Right.
When you now sit down and start with a scene, how exciting is that? Because you have no idea where it's going, but you can visualize it and it starts coming to you like you're sitting at a bar telling a story, rather than like thinking about all the walls that you're building around you that you have to stay within.
Right. Exactly. And when I start a story, like the first Jake book, I really had one scene and I didn't really know Jake. I didn't know what kind of story it's going to be. I didn't know where it was going to go. I knew it was going to be like crime fiction, and I knew I wanted it to be funny. I wanted some humor. I decided to write humor for once. And, but that's all I knew, and it just unfolded. Now, when I start a story, I usually know 5, 6, 7 scenes that are going to be in there because I've thought about it a little bit. I don't really know all the details of it, but I kind of know where to start.
Yeah.
And I kind of have a loose pathway, kind of at least to a certain point, maybe the first quarter, I'll have a few scenes in mind. But they all get moved around and changed and all that as you move. But
you never even write those scenes because you find something better to write.
Yeah, because you went in another direction. But it's fun now.
Right.
It's much more fun, like you said. It's more freeing.
Yeah, and I truly think as much work as it is, I think so much of it comes alive in the editing, where you're just like, okay, I think you're right. And when you're talking to your students, like, just tell the story, because so many people, their biggest block to getting anything done is literally just not getting it done.
Yep.
They get so wound in the idea of perfection that they write half of a book and then they write another half of another book, and then get it done and go through
That's
and
it.
edit and just be patient with yourself.
As Hemingway said, write drunk, edit sober. And that's his way of saying,
or edit
get
a
out of
little
your
bit
own
less
way.
drunk.
Yeah, exactly. Get it out of the way. And I always tell people, write fast. Go from beginning to end. You can edit crap, but you cannot edit a blank page. Just get the story told. And I'd say, of all the skills in telling a story, the single, absolute, dead solid, perfect, most important is the voice, how you tell your story. And that comes from knowledge, experience, and confidence. And the knowledge comes from reading, and the experience comes from writing, and the confidence comes from doing both of those and getting out of your own way.
Totally. I think confidence is kind of the cornerstone of not only writing, but most things in life. And I would only add to all of that is I think curiosity is a huge part of it too. Is like, because I don't outline, I'm constantly asking as I'm writing, well, what if this happened all of a sudden? Right. What does that mean? Maybe I do it, maybe I don't. But if you don't ask yourself that, you're probably blinding yourself to a lot of tremendous possibilities along the way.
Absolutely.
And you could be wrong. So tell me about your first publication journey. So you're practicing medicine, which is, not a 30-hour a week job. And you're writing
more like 80, but yeah.
Right. And you're writing and you're getting some rejections, some little things are getting published, but it's a huge learning curve. And you're, so you learn to, write query letters, you learn to find agents. Did you go through all that?
No. No, I got lucky actually many years ago, probably when I first started on this venture within a year or so. I went down to the San Diego State University Writing Conference and I met Kimberly Cameron, who's my agent now. Mm-hmm. And Kimberly and I just hit it off immediately and we just became friends almost immediately. And I told her I was working on something as my first book. And she said, well, when you get it done, send it to me. I want to see it. I said, okay, I will. Well, it took like 2.5 years to write the first book. I was about halfway through it then. And it was 138,000 words. And it was
a big book.
Wonderful. It was wonderful. It was the best book ever written. So I sent it to Kimberly and a week later, she called me back and she said, quote, there's a story in here somewhere. I just can't find it.
Wow.
And now, I said, well, that's what I needed to hear. She said, well, I hate to be so harsh. I said, Kimberly, I went to medical school. This is nothing. Nobody's going to die. And she said, but there's a lot of good stuff here. If you rewrite it, I'll read it again. Now, when have you ever heard that? So I did. I cut it down to 120,000 words, sent it back. She said, no, you're not ready yet. So make a long story short, flash forward 10 years, and we had published other stuff together. I mean, so far, she's published everything I've ever written. Huh. So I 10 years later, and I said, after 27 rewrites, 4 changes of location, 4 changes of title, and the change of the protagonist. The only thing that stayed the same was the bad guy in the basic story. I called her one day and I said, do you remember that novel from 10 years ago? And she said, oh God, yes. I said, well, it's ready now. She said, really? And she said, send it. I sent it to her. She called me a week later, said, it's ready. And that became my first Dub Walker book. But I learned to write in that 10 years. So
yeah, you learned to edit. I'm sure it wasn't 100.
You're going to get rejected. You're going to get advice. Look at it as that.
Totally.
Don't take it personally. It's professional.
I preach that all the time. The beauty of rejection and how, your agent is sending these things out to like editors who read the whole book. And what an opportunity. And even if they're rejecting it, like they'll write you a nice letter about why they don't want to publish you. And you're like, oh,
sometimes.
Okay. Sometimes
you get a half a page of boilerplate, that's what I hear. See, I've never done that. I've never submitted a book to anybody but Kimberly.
Yeah. Well, I'm just meaning.
And she's found a home for every one of them. So, I haven't had that bridge to cross for some reason, but
I've been with my same agent for almost 20 years but when she submits it to publishers and they reject it, you should still learn from those rejections.
And that happens. Sure. And that happens. Absolutely.
Oh, it happens a lot.
All the time.
And that's kind of where the confidence comes from, because if you can go through all of that and still be confident and realize like, this is all a numbers game, it's all, a lot of it's luck, a lot of it's just, I need to get better. And I think that's why I get frustrated sometimes with people who like self-publish, not because I'm against self-publishing,
right?
But when they get frustrated that like nobody's picking up this book, so I'm going to self-publish it. It's my first book. It's like, do you want that out there right now? Is it really ready to be out there? Do you know better
Yeah.
than the people who are rejecting you? So
Because there's a story in there somewhere, but the reader can't find it.
that's right. Well, so that
That's the
first,
advice. That's the
that,
advice she gave me, and it sticks true. Get better, get better, get better.
and as we progress further and further into the future, into a society of constant distraction, your readers will not wait 10 pages to be
No,
engaged.
no,
If you're not
no.
engaged in 10, and you might think it's the best first chapter ever.
Right.
And I've had friends who've gotten rejections like, oh, you lost me after the first page.
Mhm.
There's zero patience anymore.
Yep. Yep.
That's definitely hard. That first book that went from 138,000 to 120 until finally
And then
it was
about 86.
right, a normal
Like
number.
exactly.
Was that a medical thriller or what was
No,
that?
no, it was a forensic thriller. Dub Walker was a forensic expert and gets called in on cases to help solve them because he knows how to. He understands evidence and forensic science and is able to figure things out. So, and that's a 3-book series, and then I put him to bed, and then I wrote my Samantha Cody series, 3 books, and I put her to bed, and now I got these other 2 series going. I'm working on number 6 of the Jake Longley and getting ready to publish number 3 of the Kane Harper series. So yeah, they got more legs. I like these two. I like these two. And one of them's very dark,
Mm-hmm.
traditional thriller, Kane Harper, and Jake is very light and comedic. And so I go backwards and forth between the two, and I like that. It's 2 different
Oh, I
styles of
see.
writing. Yeah.
But you don't, are you writing two at the same time or you just, after you
No.
finish one, you go to the
Yeah.
other?
Go to the other, back and
Yeah.
forth, back and forth. Though I'm taking notes and thinking about the other one all the time. Yeah. Like I already got the next Kane Harper book. I can't wait to get to it, but I'm
Yeah.
going through edits right now on the next Jake book, and I got to get it sent off to Ocean View, in the next month, so I can start on the next.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm usually pretty singular. I mean, I tend to not even really think about my books until I'm sitting down writing them. And then when I'm done, I kind of go on with my day and I don't really think about them too much. But once in a while I'll have like that next book idea will just be
Yep.
this vague notion of more even a tone or a feeling. But that'll sit in me for 6 months and slowly kind of crystallize as I'm finishing up
Exactly.
something else.
Exactly.
But
And
so
back in the
unlike,
day, I've even changed books. I would start one and get 30,000 words into it, but this some other story kept intruding.
right.
And I would have to say, I got to put this aside and I've got to write this one first, then I'll come back to this one. And I did. And people always ask, well, I got 3 or 4 ideas. Which one should I do? And I said, the one that wakes you up at 2:00 in the morning,
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
because it won't leave you alone until you write it.
Right. It's a demon you have to exercise.
Exactly.
So I mean, you obviously have a lot of different series, and unlike you, I write purely standalone thrillers. And not because I have anything against series. It'd probably be a financially better idea if I did write series.
Exactly.
I just haven't been so entranced with a character that I'm like, oh, what happens next?
Right.
Did you know when you started writing like your first series, like that was something that this was going to be, I want to keep going with this character for a little while?
Yes and no, not really, but each one of them, I like the character, I like the story, and as I'm writing it, the next story starts, forming in your head, and so you just move on to it.
Yeah.
That was especially true with the Samantha Cody series. I love Sam. She's still one of my favorite characters. She's a ex-cop and professional boxer, and you don't mess with Sam. But yeah, I love the characters, and so you want to live with them a little bit longer. That's all, and I'll live with them until I don't want to live with them anymore.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you can do whatever you want to them.
Exactly.
How did you, so, you're starting to become very prolific, this is, going back a little bit and you're still practicing medicine. Are you like, where does the work life, balance start to become maybe a little bit more challenging?
Well, I'm fortunate in that I've never required much sleep. 5.5 hours is plenty.
Oh, wow.
I was born that way. I used to drive my parents crazy because I was up at 4 a.m. Dad didn't get up till 5:30 to get ready to go to work, and by that time I was already on my bicycle terrorizing the neighborhood, and it drove them crazy. But I've just never ever required much sleep. If I sleep 7 hours, I'm groggy. But
Wow.
5.5 hours is plenty. Like I was up at 4:15 this morning and I've been writing, and I went to bed probably about midnight, And that's pretty typical. I just never have
Wow.
needed much sleep. I wish I didn't need any at all because I find it a colossal waste of time. And I don't
Yeah.
understand why we have to sleep. It makes no sense. It
Yeah.
seems
That
like we would evolve that out a long time ago because sleeping is dangerous when you live in a cave.
right, right. You're
You're
never more
vulnerable.
vulnerable.
Right.
Right. Exactly. So and I'm curious to know so you've been able to juggle both things. And a lot of it's
Sure.
just like dedication and commitment and passion. Like you gotta
Sure.
like it. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it at all? So you figure out a way how to balance all these different things in your life. But then now on top of that, you've obviously become. So I want to talk a little bit about ITW, for example, and for listeners and viewers, ITW is the International Thriller Writers Organization. It's a phenomenal organization and several thousand members, and it's great to be involved with. So you got involved with that. Um, have you found what is the importance to you of like having a community of other writers that you're with and a network? What has that done for your career development?
Um, a lot. I mean, I think networking, um, and meeting other writers and hearing their stories and getting to know people, uh, and having that sense of community. And the writing community is a very giving and a very small community. It's uh, it's less competitive than people think. It's just less competitive than people think. People are always trying to help each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we have CraftFest and all that at Thriller Fest, to teach people how to write, to bring along the next generation of writers. That's why we have the debut author program there and all that. It's to kind of lift the whole boat. A lot of things in life are competitive, and obviously there is competition in writing. And people always ask, why do you think that is? Why do you think they're so giving and they're so, helping each other so much? I think because every writer knows how hard this job is. Everybody wants to be a writer, but not many people want to be a writer. And there's a difference. If you don't like sitting alone in a room and being away from friends and family and all the other stuff that life has to offer, by yourself with playing with imaginary friends, you better go do something else, because it takes hours upon hours upon hours, as you know. And I think every writer knows that. And so if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to give up everything else in life to spend that time creating something, then by God, I'm going to help you do it.
Right.
I may tell you to run away, but I'm
right.
going to help you to do it.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Well, not only is it hard, it's like you're also, 95% of the people doing it are also have another job. So
Yeah.
it's not like you're spending hours during free time. Like this is in addition to your full time. So it's really difficult. So you're right. And I think in terms of competition, I think you're right. I think, we don't look at readers saying like, okay, if you buy Doug's book, you're not going to buy my book.
No,
They'll buy
exactly.
multiple books. I think really the competition is just like writers are competing with every other thing that's in front of people's faces, their phones, Netflix,
Yeah.
or nothing at all. Just so I'm happy just to have anyone promote reading in general,
Right. Exactly.
because I think that lifts kind of
Lifts the whole
the boat
boat.
for, yeah, exactly. So,
Yep. Yep.
but
And you're competing with yourself. You're competing with yourself to tell a story that people want to read.
right,
That's it. And you
right,
got to get better at it. And you
right.
got to hope that what you write is what they enjoy.
Isn't that one of the great things about this? Is, I think, probably the greatest thing about writing to me is that there's no age limit to it. There's no really experience limit to it. You get better as you get older. But I love the idea that every book that I'm about to start writing, I think this could be my best book ever.
Right.
And that's so exciting to me. And I don't know what's going to happen, but like how can I make this better? The challenge of it all, of trying to like, not just do the same thing, but like, what's going to be different about this? And that I don't see how that would ever go away, no matter how old I get.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
do you feel like that as well?
Oh, absolutely. And the only caveat in all that for again beginning writers is that about 40, 50,000 words, you realize it's a hot mess and you're a fraud and you don't know what you're doing. And this is awful. And this is the worst thing you've ever written. And my God,
Right.
why are you wasting your time doing it? You know, but after I'm working on what, that 24th book now, after you get a dozen of them under your belt, you say, shut up, you idiot. You've been here before. In fact, you're here every time. Just keep moving forward. It'll work out.
Right.
And that's it.
Well, that's where
That's
the
it.
confidence comes from, because
Exactly.
that 40, 50,000 word despondency, that never goes away, no
Never
matter
goes
how
away.
confident you are, because
Never goes away.
you're in the throes of the second act and you're like, this thing sucks. I'm sick of it. And I
Right.
still, I've got another 30,000 words to go at least on this
Yeah.
thing.
But when you
Yeah.
cross that 50,000 word mark and you start on the downhill slide, it's like, okay, I got this now.
Yeah.
I know where it's going. I know what's going to happen. I know what the end game is finally. And here we go. And those last 30,000 words really write themselves because everything's been set up by then.
See, that doesn't
Everything's
happen
in
for me.
motion. Yeah. It just flies.
I usually don't know the ending until I'm about 85% of the way into the book.
Right.
Oh, this is maybe what happens.
Yeah.
I do a lot of rewriting, but that's what's fun for me. So, well, that's very exciting for you. So before we wrap up, we're going to do a little storytelling game. This is the fun part of the most fun part of the show. I've selected 3 books more or less at random here, some mass market paperbacks. And you're going to pick one, we're going to pick a sentence, and we're going to do just a quick little couple minute storytelling. So I've got a Hostile Witness by William Lashner.
Okay.
Show of Evil by William Deal. And a Dean Koontz book, Relentless. So pick one of those.
I have no idea. I'll leave it to you.
All right, I'm going to pick Hostile Witness.
Okay.
So pick a sentence or pick a page between 1 and 600. Oh, it's a big book.
Oh, 1 in 600, 350.
Okay.
Just for the heck of it.
And then pick a sentence between, say, 1 and 5.
5.
Okay, so I'm going to read this.
Okay.
So I'm going to read a sentence, and then you just give me the next whatever you want, sentence or two after it, and then I'll jump in and do a couple sentences, and then we'll just see where this goes.
Okay.
But the bastard had threatened me, given me orders, turned me into his cabana boy, and that was his mistake.
Because he didn't know I had a knife in my back pocket and I was going to slit his throat and leave him bleeding on the tarmac.
But there were too many people around. I couldn't just jump into it like that. I searched for exit routes, knowing really there was nothing easy, no easy exit for me to escape to. So I had to play this a little bit cooler. I had to keep the knife in its sheath. He invited me into a stretch limo and pointed me to the back seat. I slid in and he came in behind me.
And I said, "Where are we going?" And he said, "You'll find out when we get there."
The car started. The divider was up and I couldn't see the chauffeur. He remained silent in the back seat, still unwilling to give me his name. He wore a beautiful, crisp, sharkskin colored suit. But that wasn't what intrigued me the most. What intrigued me the most was the ring on his right hand. It was the wedding ring I had lost 15 years ago.
And now I knew that somewhere, somehow, my ex-wife was involved in this. Was she part of the plot? Was she part of the kidnapping? Was she dead? Where was she? And what did she have to do with the man in the sharkskin suit?
My wife's name is Becky. So I started mumbling that word underneath my breath, barely so I could even hear it, but I wanted to see if I could get his attention at all, if it registered at all with him. He looked at me and said, "Why do you keep saying that?"
Yet his eyes lied. His eyes told me he was lying. The slight dilatation of his pupils and the slight crinkle at the corner of his eyes told me that he knew exactly what I was talking about, and that maybe, just maybe, I knew more than he wanted me to know.
So I decided to be bold about it. I looked at him and said, she's a real pain in the ass, you know. If you spend more than 2 weeks alone with her, you'll go crazy. Is that what you want?
And he said, "Oh God, are you telling the truth?"
All right, I think we call it there. he turned him around at the end.
That's great.
Isn't that a fun exercise?
That's a fun exercise. Yeah.
I could visualize it. So what's your next release, Doug?
The third Kane Harper book, which is called Tallyman. It's set in a small town in southwestern Tennessee, just above the Mississippi border. And it has a series of murders and stuff. And then I'm working on, like I said, the next Jake book, which is set down in Magnolia Springs, mostly, and Gulf Shores down in the south of Alabama, on Mobile Bay. And it has to do with a financial self-help cult.
Oh,
That some girl has gone missing from, and Jake and Nicole and Pancake and Ray have to go figure out who, what, when, where, and how, and of course, comedy ensues.
so are you still practicing medicine, or are you just writing now?
No, I go to the office a couple of days a week, but I don't go to the hospital or do procedures anymore. I did that for over 25 years. That was enough. And we got younger guys in the group, and there's 3 of us that left that founded the group, and then we got 10 guys now. So we brought in a bunch of people, and they do all the heavy lifting now.
Okay.
God bless them. Yeah. I remember those days. I enjoyed the hell out of it, but I'm glad to be on the other side.
Right. I can imagine.
Yeah.
And you have plans to go to BoucherCon at all this year?
No, I don't have any conferences planned this year,
Oh,
because
nice.
we're taking this long road trip across the U.S. and but we'll see. Probably next year I'll get started back on the conference circuit, because I miss all my friends.
Yeah. Well, isn't that's so much a part of it? It's just to be able to hang out and have some
Absolutely.
drinks with the people that you've kind of gone to war with.
Oh, absolutely, and there's so many of them. It's just so much fun to sit in the bar and BS. Tell
Totally.
lies.
Totally.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I look forward to seeing you at one of them at some point in the future. But hey, have a fantastic road trip and be safe.
Well, this was great. Thank you. I'll come back anytime. You're outstanding at this.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. I really had a good time talking to you. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. That was my conversation with DP Weil. He was great. I feel like, after interviewing him, there was a lot of good advice that he imparted in this episode. So hopefully people will, especially aspiring writers, will maybe take some of his advice, and especially, again, kind of getting out of your own way is such a big one. And, don't get so caught up on reading all of the books about writing and trying to figure out all the rules so you don't break them. It really is more about developing a voice and not thinking about boundaries, at least for me. So he was fantastic. If you want to know more about him, you can just go to his website, which is dplylemd.com. And if you want to find out more about me, just go to my website, carterwilson.com. I've got all sorts of information in there, and you can subscribe to my newsletter, which is always a blast. And I would appreciate that. So more episodes coming out soon. In the meantime, thank you for watching and for listening. Take care.